Hello, good morning, everyone. It is Monday morning, February 2nd. I'm actually getting the date today on here. That's a first. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad. This is Sick of This Shit Publications, and welcome to Chronically Illing Out. I've got my good friend, Beth Cruz. Good morning.
Hey.
And my other good friend, Stephanie Wilson. Good morning.
Good morning.
And today we're welcoming on a special guest, my mom. So, good morning, everyone. This is my mom, Phyllis. She is a retired licensed school psychologist and also one of the smartest people I know, and has taught me a lot. And you all know, because I talk about my parents a lot on my shows, and the positive influences that they've had. Yes, her name is not appearing on the Substack Live. That was by choice today. But I want to give my mom a little bit of time here to say hi, introduce herself, and we're going to be talking today overall about COVID-19, the impacts on kids, child development, and what some of us as parents can do using tips from a licensed school psychologist to look out for their kids, to learn about signs and see what they might need to do, and how they can help, and how parents can be better parents to their kids and pass on these good learning skills. So, Mom, good morning, and do you mind introducing yourself?
Not a problem. Good morning. I'm Phyllis. And as Nick said, I am his mom. I am a recently, like 2 years, retired school psychologist, although I still carry an active retired license and I am still working in my school district helping out with evaluations. I am also a adjunct professor at one of our local colleges where I teach 2 evening classes in the graduate clinical psych department. That's also where I earned my master's in clinical psychology. And I am a diplomat in the board of school neuropsychology. The brain is a fascinating topic because there is so much that we do not know about it.
Yes, there is.
You know, we're finding out more and more each day, but there's a lot we don't know. And unfortunately, or fortunately, nowadays we have ways of looking at the brain without having to wait till somebody dies and doing an autopsy, which was previously how we looked at the brain. I was 27 years in the school district that I worked in, 3 before that, 30, and I've still been working for the last 2 years. So over 30 years as a school psychologist. I've worked at all age levels. My initial work was with teenagers who were in a locked facility, who were sexually or physically aggressive. Then I worked K through 12, and then I narrowed my focus down to K through 6. I like the little ones. I like all kids, but the little ones are great to work with in schools because there's still a lot of potential for making change. So aside from Nick, I have 2 other kids, a doggy, a hubby who's listening over on the side. We realized that we couldn't listen in 2 rooms adjacent to each other because there'd be too much feedback. That is listening. He's just listening from the dining room table.
That's fair. He gets a different view this time than normal. So, Mom, and also this is Chronically Illing Out, and I know you have a chronic illness or 2.
Yes, I do.
If you're willing to share, do you mind sharing at least 1 or 2, or what you have for some chronic illnesses?
Yeah.
And we'll be able to talk about that today too as we weave it in our discussions.
So the first chronic illness I was diagnosed with was fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed with that. Sorry, bud. I was diagnosed with that when Nick was about 2.5, 3 years old. It came after I had had several incidences where my muscles had just stopped working. I'd be riding a bike and I'd fall over because my legs weren't working. And I got to the point where I was afraid to pick him up. And so I had an infant, a toddler, a teenager in the house, and I had muscles that weren't working properly. I also had a migraine that started. and for 6 months didn't go away.
I know.
My first real introduction to the medical community and them dealing with women with autoimmune disorders was not the best. I got sent to a neurologist, got tested for MS, and when the test came back negative, I got told that it was all in my head. So the fibro, I mean, you're talking 30 some odd years ago, the fibro diagnosis was still relatively new. And there were many doctors who didn't really believe that it existed, that it was a female thing related to stress, which they're finding out, no, it is not. There is actually some real research being done now looking at the fact that it tends to be more on how the brain processes pain than it is on stress. So that was my first introduction. About 8 years ago, I got diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, which is a form of spinal arthritis that causes the spine to fuse. Mine is in remission currently. I'm hoping that my most recent surgery did not throw me into a flare. But that's been an ongoing battle for a few years now. Should have been caught earlier. Again, another issue with the medical community that was not. With fibro also comes a host of other different little things that aren't really so little. But the diagnosis of fibro and ankylosing spondylitis brought a lot of symptoms together. It was one of those things where all of a sudden light bulbs went on. Okay, this is why this hurts, because ankylosing spondylitis is related to the tendons and the spine. Fibro is related to the muscle. So I can have pain from both disorders in different places. And then in the regular good old osteoarthritis that we get as we get older. And, some of the offshoots of ankylosing spondylitis, like a tendency to get tendinitis anywhere where joints insert into bones. So hasn't been a fun ride, but it's who I am. I think it made me a lot stronger because I absolutely refuse to become a disease that has a person. I'm a person that has a disease. And that's how I function in life. So
That's great.
If you couldn't tell where I get some of my outlook and views on how I do things, it's sitting right there, down there on that corner. The other one is sitting in the living room somewhere or in the dining room away from her or near her. But my parents have influenced me a lot in how I am and who I am as an adult. And I'm, as Melissa Corrigan in our chat says, one of our really good friends is, oh, your mom's spitting bars. Yes. I'll shut up and let Steph, Beth, you guys talk on this. I'm just excited that my mom's here to hang out for a show. I think it's kind of cool.
I've been watching.
It is.
It's nice to be a part of it this time.
I am really.
You're a part of it in the chat too.
Yes. I'm trying to figure out how to turn off the chat voice, so because I have you here, but I'm.
Oh, just or is it on the same computer?
No.
Just turn your volume down on the iPad then.
Okay, there we go.
I've always been tech support for my mom and my dad too.
Whereas my husband tries very, very hard not to have to do that. And gives his parents they get actual tech support, as does my dad and stepmom. It's really great to hear from you, Phyllis. As a mom with a chronic migraine and probably a bunch of the other things that you have, definitely some of the art.
Beth or Steph, you muted yourself.
Okay, I don't know how. Maybe I don't know. Anyway, just hearing from you as a mom that has a bunch of stuff, sort of, and relating it to parenting, I think is really great. I don't know how much you heard. I have chronic daily migraine and probably a bunch of arthritises that I am currently in denial about, and have passed along some of that to my kiddo who's just graduating high school this year. So I'm glad to hear about how it is for you and sort of how you have approached it. And also would love at some point to hear from you on how the way you feel physically intersects with what you do professionally, which intersects with how kids are dealing with COVID, which intersects with long COVID and potential actual brain changes with COVID. And that's 15 questions, which I am notorious for asking all at the same time. I'm very sorry to.
That's okay. They all intersect with one another. So we'll do what we can as we go. And if we need to chat at another time, that's okay too. But yes, and honestly, it's not even a probably. There is research showing that the COVID has had an impact on brain development in many different ways, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So,
yeah, and I don't think it's just being out of school.
No,
there's more. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that that is not just me making stuff up.
I think being out of school affected different people in different ways. Those with, unfortunately, there's where a lot of equity issues came out, because those with good home support, those with good access to the internet, and parents who were very involved made it to the online learning sessions.
Or the privilege, like yes. I had of, I had 2 months where my kid was just an absolute wreck, and I was going to either commit suicide or homicide, and I managed to get him into a private school, which is an incredible privilege because he was in school for the whole time after that first 2 months. But still, there's still it can't be completely related to being out of school because that variable is taken out a little bit.
Yeah. I think it is bigger than COVID. If you think that COVID is a piece of the puzzle, as a school psychologist, one of my most in-depth training originally was in assessment. And I look at assessment and I look at the pieces of the puzzle of how we put together what's happening for a child, the family, and other pieces that then can be put together as a whole to see what we can do. When you think back to COVID, or at the start of COVID, we were already in a state of flux politically, and it was not helped by the reactions at upper levels and the negative interactions between those in charge and the medical community around how we were going to handle this. So even before the world shut down around us, anxiety levels were starting to rise. Not necessarily in children as much as in parents. And that's where one of the biggest things that we have to look at when we look at child development is not just COVID and how it affects the brain, but also mental health. And how it affects parents, because the influence of parents on their children's mental health is huge. So there's a lot of intersectionality there that it's going to be hard, I think, and would be wonderful if somebody eventually can separate out all those pieces, but I think they're going to be very tightly intertwined for a long time.
And is there a place, I've heard a number of different studies that link children's attention to prior to COVID to the advent of cell phones and most kids having a phone in their hand at all times.
Yeah, that's another whole soapbox altogether is the use of technology in kids, because research has clearly shown that time on a device, particularly with the population that I work with, who tend to watch very violent television, play very violent video games, that there is definitely a change in brain structure, and that those changes may be permanent. And so we're looking at a generation of kids who were very attached to screens prior to COVID. And then COVID came and they were home. And they weren't going to school or they weren't going to daycare. But guess where learning was happening? It was happening on the screen. And so we didn't help that addiction in any way, shape, or form. It added to it. And how did kids talk to their friends on the screens? The screen became our world. It became our link with the outside world. But we all know, most of us should know, that what we see on a screen and what we read online is not always the big picture. And so while our world expanded in some way because we could reach out to people all over the world on Zoom and other things, it narrowed in many ways, particularly for children. And that has been one of the farthest reaching pieces, is that children's ability to socialize, especially young children. When I think about those kids who should have been in preschool or in daycare settings during COVID, and even the young elementary school, first, second grade, lost that ability to socialize. And so
I think older kids too.
Oh, absolutely. But older kids had a little bit, had more experience with being social than the younger kids did. So they took it in a very different way. And unfortunately, where we ended up with a lot of older kids is some really not so nice ways of dealing with one another online. Cyberbullying became a real fact, cause for suicide in many cases. Things that we couldn't always track because they were done on apps that you'd put something out and then it would disappear. So we didn't always have a way of tracking things. But the biggest, the academic changes, everybody slowed down academically during that time. So when they talked about, having to come back and catch everybody up because of COVID, everybody fell behind. It's not just certain kids. I mean, our kids who were special ed, who had disabilities to begin with, may have fallen much further behind because a lot of these kids didn't access screen time. They didn't come to their classes. Some of them may not have had internet at home, and they couldn't go to the library to get online because the library was closed. So some of the families I work with spent that whole time with no interaction with the outside world other than their families. So
I want to make a point from our comments in the chat here. Our friend Melissa Corrigan has had some really good thoughts on some of the opposite end, on the positive side of the impact. Because I think for some of us, I know I had young kids during COVID too. Like mine were sort of the perfect age for COVID. Mine were like early school and not in school. So when we got out of it, we held our kids back and we kept them the grade below, which we've noticed actually a lot of parents did too. Like our children are not the only ones who are a year older than their grade level. And I think it's fantastic that a lot of people did that. But what Melissa says in the chat is, I think there was also a positive impact for some families if they had the privilege to financially support their household throughout. I belong to this sort of subsection of families who had babies, young children, who had the distinct advantage being home with parents and families. They got ultra nurtured. So I think there's a distinct difference between households with white collar parents who could work remotely and be ultra present for their kids, and those who work blue collar jobs and had to be away from their kids while they were home from school. So what are your thoughts on that, Mom?
Well, I was alluding to that at the very beginning of the conversation, is that not just blue collar, white collar, but also ethnic, poverty level, the availability of having resources. One of the things we found was, in some families with more than one or two kids, maybe one child came on, but if 3 classes were having lessons at the same time, not all kids could access their class lessons. And yes, those with families who could be present, who are working from home, or whose parents were checking in throughout the day, did somewhat better. And those without, there were some who were totally without, never mind not even having support from family, but who didn't have internet access. In my school, when we closed down, every child went home with a Chromebook. But Chromebook is wonderful only if you have internet to access. A lot of families were using their cell phone hotspots. Well, when you are on a phone that has a limited amount of data, that hotspot may not last long enough for a child to get through a day's worth of lessons, let alone a week's worth. So yes, there were some positive things. I think in some families, it helped families draw closer together. It brought them together. Families discovered jigsaw puzzles again and other things. But in some cases, I don't want to say many because I don't like using those large terms, but in cases, it also drew families apart from one another because everybody's sequestered on their screens, not just the kids. Mom and dad were on screens talking to family members, or doom scrolling, as we like to say, being on Facebook and scrolling through Facebook. And then things began to change politically. And tensions began to change, and then they changed again. And with that came real anxiety. It's been interesting when I remember coming back to school after the pandemic was done and we were back in school. And of course, the first couple of months we were there, kids had to be 6 feet apart. So desks were all moved around and we had to do all these precautions. And we had parents coming to the school board saying that making their children wear masks at school was a form of child abuse. And so we had those differing opinions too. And that was feeding into the anxiety, the anger, the depression that we were seeing, not just in adults, but in children, because kids were hearing one thing from their parents and another thing at school, and then possibly a third or fourth thing from peers. And lots of negativity began to flow. But then we got back to normal. But what didn't change was special ed requirement to look at kids for eligibility for special ed services. Unfortunately, what didn't change in all of that was the norming of many of these social emotional measures to include kids who'd gone through COVID. And they still haven't changed. There are many social emotional measures that have not been renormed since COVID. And so when we're looking at anxiety, when we're looking at depression, we're comparing kids who came through COVID on a test measure that was normed before COVID. So normal isn't normal anymore. The baseline has changed dramatically. And so go ahead, Nick.
Sorry to interrupt there. What would you suggest as parents, not specifically for me, because I hear your thoughts a lot, on this, so I know these sorts of things. But for other parents, what would you suggest looking out for in their kids as a new baseline against for, say, depression or anxiety?
Well, and the hard part is I'm not saying that depression and anxiety is not real, because the levels of depression and anxiety in our society right now are probably the highest they've ever been. At least because people are talking about it. We don't know if it's the highest it's ever been, because there was a time in our lives when people didn't talk about mental illness. And I don't like the terminology. When we do evaluations in schools, it's called an emotional disturbance. That's how it's looked at. And anxiety and depression fall under one of there are 5 categories we have to look at. And anxiety and depression are only 2 of the 5 categories. And so those 2 categories are often diagnosed by psychiatrists or doctors, being what a psychiatrist is. As a school psychologist, I can make the determination or a diagnosis that a child is showing indications of anxiety or depression based on information that I get through parent reports, based on information I get through teacher report, based on information I get through kids. But the normative sample I'm comparing it to is not the same as it would be if we were comparing it to other kids who went through COVID. And I think, unfortunately, that's nothing we can do anything about. That has to be done through testing companies. They have to renorm their measures. So we in schools, what we have seen is the expression of those feelings being dealt with in not very good ways. We have seen a lot more acting out behaviors, a lot of anger, some of it fed by information that's not correct. Some of it fed by people really feeling, I missed 2 years of my life. So there's a lot we did see. And for me, as a school psychologist in schools, one of the biggest things we saw was a change in behaviors from preschool forward, because kids didn't have the chance to be with other children during COVID. So they didn't learn those socialization skills. And in those times when they were home, the world revolved around them. They didn't have to worry about sharing unless they were sharing with siblings, but that they were used to because they lived together. And all of a sudden they come into school and they're one of however many kids in a classroom, and they have to share, and they don't have the teacher's attention all the time. But more importantly, they don't have coping skills. And without good coping skills, we don't know how to take those negative feelings coming to us and sitting back and thinking, how do we make this change? So what we did in schools had to change. And what parents have to do it has to change. But parents also are having their own mental health issues. And so there's a lot that needs to be done with not as many people out there helping anymore. The helping field is shrinking as we say on one hand, we need to focus on mental health. And on the other hand, we're losing psychiatrists, psychologists all over the place. So, but things to look out for. Is your normally interactive child not interacting anymore? Look for marked changes in behavior. So, if your normal gregarious, outspoken kid isn't so much anymore, that's something to note. Or the opposite, if they were normally very withdrawn, but are now angry, what's happening there is some of those internal feelings are coming out. I'll be very honest. I worry more about kids who are internalized than I do about kids who are externalizing. Externalizing means showing out to the world that you're upset, you're angry. You may be the kid who has a temper tantrum, throws a plate across the room, yells at your parents. But those feelings are coming out. What needs to be done with those kids is working with somebody who helps them to learn to express those feelings in positive ways. I spent a lot of years in schools telling kids, no feelings are wrong. No feelings are wrong. It's okay to be angry. What's not okay is how you act on that anger, because behavior comes from emotional reaction. So when you have a big reaction to something, you react to it. You know, internally, you have a big reaction to something. Some kids suck that in. Other kids immediately react to it. They may curse at you. They may try to get into a power control issue with you. But those kids we know need stuff. The kids who internalize, who take it, suck it all in, who you ask how they're doing, and I'm okay, I'm hanging in there, are the kids I worry about more, because when that dam finally breaks, these are your kids who are at high risk for suicide or self-harm. Because what self-harm really is, kids who cut, kids who do that, is their way of letting the pain out. And to some kids, that's the only way they feel comfortable doing it. So we as a society need to find a way to continue to make mental health something we talk about in a positive light. Not that we have to sweep it under the rug, but to get help, not just for our kids, but for ourselves. To find ways, because if you're an anxious, depressed, or angry parent and you're dealing with an anxious, depressed, or angry child, that's not a good chemical mixture. So it's not just helping our kids, we have to help ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me it does.
Absolutely. You know,
I think, just real quick, Steph, I think this is a space that we're trying to make for that, is to make it so it's positive to talk about mental health. It's easy to talk about it, and we can do wellness together.
Exactly. But not in the like fake wellness crap, like real wellness. And I think that parents who are aware of their own psychological makeup can be much more able to hold space for their kids. If, I don't know, I guess it's dependent on whether you are able to put aside your own anxiety, depression, and make room for your kids, or whether you center yourself or your children, or whether you're able to say, yeah, kiddo, I'm really anxious too. You know, let's do this together.
Absolutely. How we approach it and how we are willing to admit that we're dealing with our own issues is huge, because if our children think it's something to hide because that's what we do, then they're not going to. I mean, nobody ever comes to the school psychologist for the first time willingly. You know, I have had kids knock on my door asking if I want to have lunch with them, but nobody comes to therapy, especially a child who really doesn't understand. I mean, I did play therapy while I was in schools. My school district was one of the few. In many school districts, the only thing school psychologists do is testing. I was very lucky to work in a school district where for 27 years, I carried a caseload of kids that I saw therapeutically, all through their elementary years. So there was a lot of continuity there. But COVID took a bite out of that. I mean, it's hard to do therapy with a 5 or 6 year, to do play therapy via Zoom. You know, so my visits were really check-ins with them. But yeah, I mean, it's not just a child piece. This is a piece that families need to wrap their heads around, and recognize our children don't always deal with things in the same way. You can have 4 kids and each child can cope with things very differently. One of the things that always amazed me is in schools is when you have kids who come from the same chaotic, really horrendous, abusive backgrounds, why some of them adjust better than others? What is it about those kids? And I'll tell you what, if we could ever figure that out, I'd be out of a job in days, and I would be very happy for it if we can ever figure out what makes some people resilient and why others struggle.
Is this somewhere where you think I have a question from the chat too as well, but I want both questions of this. This is mine. Is this somewhere you think that the neuropsych work that you are a part of and that others are doing could be helpful to find a link in terms of like brain chemistry and how that could be balanced through either medication or just like enzymes or a specific vitamin or whatever the heck it is that could rebalance it? Do you think the work on the neuropsych side is key towards finding that link between resilience and non?
That I'm not sure, Nick, because I'm not sure anybody really knows where resilience comes from and why.
Okay.
It would certainly be wonderful if there was an interdisciplinary. Hold on a second. Let me mute so that till Dad.
Well, my mom is muted. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us in the chat. Smash the heart if you're on Substack. We've got a couple folks with us on other channels too. Thank you so much for everyone who's with us on YouTube, on Twitch, on Substack. Love having all of you here with us. It's really, really wonderful to have this community.
Hey, Melissa, Melissa just says, I wish there wasn't a link between trauma happening and resilience happening. And I
agree.
I totally agree. And I think one of the pieces that we're not talking about now, because obviously it's a massive subject, is we've got the kids with COVID. So we've got whatever it did to their brain, plus the time at home, plus an authoritarian regime right now. So this isn't the greatest time to be a kid. Not only do you have to deal with, you know, whatever learning loss you had, what kinds of social, emotional anxieties you have, whatever attention or autism, ADHD, autism, OCD, all that overlap. But you also have the worry of not having a future and your parents being really, really anxious all the time because the world is falling apart. So it's a really tough time to be a kid, I think, at any age. I mean, I'm dealing with one who's, you know, a senior in high school, so he talks about it a lot more, or it's much more, it's closer to the surface because future is closer to the surface. But I think this is I mean, I think 100 years ago when there were, you know, say at the turn of the 20th century, there was World War I. There was the flu, which basically got memory hold, and nobody talked about that as a pandemic, but tons and tons and tons of people died. Then there was a depression. Then there was World War II. Then, you know, so like all of this stuff happened within a 25-year period. So I think that, but less talking about it. I mean, they didn't talk about it the way we're talking about it. So in some ways, if you look at it historically, you know, those were the parents of maybe the boomers, maybe the generation above. Then the boomers were the parents of Gen X and millennials. I mean, it just sort of compounds as you have different societal impacts and parenting styles among different generations. So
yeah, and so growing on that too, from the chat that the question I wanted to get to before I lose it, is from one of our subscribers, Carol, what is a good resource to find a psychologist, or I'll add on to the question, or support for, say, child psychology or child development?
Is that being addressed to me, Lear?
Yeah, Mom, sorry. Do you know if there are any good resources for either, for specifically for children to be able to, or parents to be able to have access to around their kids, for support, to get psychologists networks in the area, things like that? Do you know?
I
of
have
any
an answer
good
to that
resources?
after Phyllis.
Oh, okay.
Some of it depends on the community that you're in. We have a lot of community mental health agencies here, and they have their own therapist online. We also, I know in school, our counseling, our school counselors. I was very lucky to work in an elementary school where it wasn't just me, the school psychologist. There was myself, a school psychologist. We had a full-time clinical psychologist from mental health, and we had 3 school counselors. What we knew as guidance counselors, but they're referred to now simply as school counselors. Our school counselors kept a list of local therapists and what their specialties were. The bigger problem is, since COVID, many of our therapists have gone offline. They do a lot more remote therapy, and that's not necessarily the best format for young kids. For high school kids, it may be okay, but not, but not even for all the high school kids. There's something about being on a screen with somebody you're supposed to be building a relationship with that changes. That's different than when you're sitting in a room with somebody. I mean, even my older kids, when they came in, my 5th and 6th graders who'd been with me since they were in preschool or kindergarten, we played when they came into my office. We didn't just sit across from one another at a table like you might in a therapist office. We might play a game of Farkle or Boggle or something that allowed them to talk without necessarily having to make eye contact, which, as most of us know with kids, that's one of the hardest things to do, is to get them to feel comfortable looking at you, even those kids who are not neurodivergent. So look to community. Many doctors' offices now have lists of psychologists, psychiatrists. Some doctors' offices have their own social workers who will do short-term therapy. So there are a number of different ways. The biggest piece that we're fighting is shortages, is not having enough people out there to meet the needs of the population. I have families who are on year-long waiting lists to get therapy. And you can't guarantee that the first person you meet with, you're going to click with. So.
Very true. Beth, you haven't said much. Do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to say, I didn't have children during COVID. My children, my 4 are all adults. It was still very stressful, and I had COVID twice, and I don't feel like I personally, as an adult, ever came back from that fully. My husband doesn't feel like he came back from that fully. I feel like I have more difficulty just with racing thoughts that I did not have prior. Much more anxiety than I ever had. So yeah, I can only imagine what this has done to our children's brains when I can see that it's affected my adult brain. So yeah, I'm just fascinated by your insight on this. It's really interesting to talk about the kids involved. It is very concerning. I see a whole generation of kids coming up that are really going to need support, for sure.
Yeah,
that's just my thoughts.
I want to answer a little bit differently than Phyllis did about how do you find therapists. It's been in the chat. Psychology Today is a phenomenal place to find therapists. I found, I think, all of my family's therapists, and there've been a lot on there, because you can find out what their specialty is, what kind of insurance they take, what do they specialize in, whether they're LGBTQ friendly, whether they deal with kids, whether they do EMDR or whatever. It's a really great resource. Or whether they do virtual, like adults. It opened up the opportunities for me as an adult because I can do virtual therapy, but it also opened up the opportunities for my kid who needed to be in person. And we've been really, really lucky. So I would go there. I mean, I think local resources are great, but they don't always know who takes what insurance or what the actual specialties are or how they deal with, what sorts of disorders, particularly around kids. But
well, and it's important to note that kids are a specialty. You cannot necessarily take a child to an adult to a psychologist whose specialty is adults, because the approach that we do with kids is different, but their needs are also different. And there are, unfortunately, we are, finding that there are some people whose, it wasn't that long ago people who thought the children didn't get depressed or anxious, and so now society has changed and realized that, these are not just adult only disorders. There's still some things that, some disorders that they refuse to acknowledge that kids may have. And so times will change. I think when the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that psychologists live by, gets updated, hopefully things will change again, and we'll start looking at the broader picture, and we'll be looking at the impact of not just COVID, but long COVID. Because kids who've had long COVID have missed out on substantially more things. Because one of the things that they're finding is that long COVID, unfortunately, opens the door to autoimmune disorders.
I want to jump in on that. I would agree. I think that my fibro has been worse since COVID. I'm having more. Well, you mentioned tendon and muscle and all of that. I'm under the spondyloarthropathy, my psoriatic arthritis, and my fibro, and I have noticed just a major difference in my physical health and pain being ramped up since COVID. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience, but yeah, it's been challenging for sure.
I developed my fibro after COVID, or at least it announced itself well after COVID. So I don't know if mine is linked in any way, but I mean, with my mom also having it genetically, I was predisposed to it. And so I think it's also good to note too in this conversation is, even if you don't have a insurance provider, there are a lot of folks who are starting to do the non-insurance coverage rates that are separate so that people who don't have insurance can still get services, because a lot of the providers really care. Like it's not the providers who are the problem when it comes to like how expensive and like what's happening for folks. It's the insurance company in the middle. And so providers are starting to work around that in ways too. So sometimes look out for that for yourself or for your like family and friends if they need support on that, because maybe you can find a provider that's doesn't need insurance to be covered and is not $1,000 a visit or whatever obnoxious rate non-insurance can be, or uncovered visits can be. And this has been an incredible discussion. Thank you, Mom, for coming on. Thank you for giving us all this really good information to be able to share and spread with everyone. I want to close out our show a little bit here with first a big announcement. And then second, we'll move into our meditation, is for those who may not have noticed, next to Beth's head on the screen, there's a QR code that says "Sick of This Shop." We have, with the wonderful help of Beth Cruz, of Courtney, of Steph,
Courtney.
of So, of all the work of everyone in our group, who's volunteered to help and support in so many ways. The Sick of This Shop is now open. And if you go to that QR code, it will automatically apply a 20% discount during this first week. So during this first week, if you want, go to that QR code in the top corner. I'll even drop it in the chat. It will probably update the name on it too, so that it actually says Sick of This Shop, instead of Sick of This Shit Publications Shop on the name, but that's a quick change. We just opened it yesterday. I'm going to drop the link here in the chat. Please include everything on that link if you want to get the discount code automatically applied to your cart even before you begin shopping. I tried it out this morning. That's how I know that this works. I AI'd it and I was like, can I even do this? What is the process to do this? Because this is all new to me. So merch shopping for everyone. If you'd like, thank you all for the ideas and the thoughts. We're going to be continuing to put out like different merch and building out new things as well. So thank you so much to the two people who have scanned the QR code. Anyone who goes, love you, appreciate you. It's awesome. I think y'all will love what you see. We've got Chronically Illing Out merch, and we've got Notes of the Week merch. So special shout out for the Notes of the Week merch to my friend who made the artwork for it.
Oh.
Do you have emojis enabled on your? You can turn on reactions on your MacBook. In the top bar on your screen, there's a little camera icon, like recording icon.
It's green at the very
That's
top.
green. Very, very top of your screen.
Yeah.
Probably on the right. If you click on that, it'll open up and show you a little camera window.
Okay, I'll have to look for it later.
Okay, you can do it later, but I'll help you after the show real quick.
Okay.
You can scan the code with in the post show. If you cannot do it right now, I will also have it linked in the show notes. I'll drop the QR code here, or the link here. I know it's hard on the phone. Substack does not make it easy. Thank you to the 9 people who've now scanned the QR code. Holy shit. Like, y'all are freaking awesome.
I can't even tell you. I have to say I'm so excited.
Beth has put so much work and support into this. I really want to shout out like how amazing Beth has been in this process, and the volunteer support that she's done with me, and questions she's asking, and the learning she's doing. It's amazing. Elizabeth, or for anyone who can't scan the QR code for some reason, again, I'll make sure the link is in the show notes today so that everyone is able to do that after the show. Appreciate all of you. You're amazing. This will help me eventually be able to pay Beth as a employed member of the community. That's my hope here coming up. I've got 2 people, one for each company, that we're looking at eventually trying to be our firsts. And there's you guys help. Everyone helps make that possible. The merch will make that possible. And so we've gone on a little while for that amazing announcement. Thank you, Beth, for that. Wonderful. We're going to switch over now to our meditation, or not medication.
Perhaps
not medication. I mean, it is kind of medication. Here's your mental medication for the morning. Here's your mental health medication for the morning, a meditation by Beth Cruz, our Alaskan cruise meditation today. It is already available on the Time for Life section of Sick of This Shit Publications. I will also link that in the show. So everyone, please keep your eyes open again. Watch the video and the beautiful photos. Listen to Beth, and we will see you on the flip side of that here in a couple minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome to our Alaskan cruise virtual meditation. Join me by taking a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale out through your mouth. Take another deep breath in and slowly exhale out. One more deep breath in and slowly exhale out. Take a moment to relax your body and mind. As you cruise through this journey, continue to breathe slowly and rhythmically, like waves on the ocean. With each breath, you feel more relaxed. If any muscles feel tense, allow them to relax. It is okay to be present and embrace this moment of calm. Inhale the beauty and peace, and exhale all that does not serve you. Scan your neck and shoulders. Become aware of your body. Whatever heavy weight you may be carrying, let it go. Release it. Feel it falling away. Feel the tension and stress. Leave your shoulders, your arms, your fingers. Allow your chest and your core to relax, followed by your legs and feet. You are safe in this moment. It is okay just to breathe and be. At any time during your day or week that you feel overwhelmed or anxious, return to this moment of gentle release. Remember to take care of you.
That was neat. The transition worked super well on that. Beth, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Welcome.
And so I want to, yep, we'll get our hearts going for ourselves too. Is first off, I want to thank my mom again for being here with us. This was so wonderful and so appreciated. And I hope you will come back for another discussion or two with us. I think you have a lot of information that would benefit a lot of people. I know you know that I always sort of poke you in the background, like you should be writing. You should write a book. You should write. Well, you have a free way if you want to on Substack to be able to write. So I encourage you to because I think a lot of people would benefit from your knowledge. So thank you everyone for being here with us. I'm going to give my co-hosts, as always, their chance to promote themselves. And I'm saying it differently this time because I'm learning to, instead of sell yourself, which has some bad undertones to it, is let's promote ourselves. And I want to start first off, come join me here at Sick of the Shit Publications. Thank you everyone for being here with us. This has been so fun. Like I said, and amazing to be here and to have all of you in the chat and the discussion with us on all of our platforms. So thank you for joining me here on Sick of the Shit Publications. I'm going to then hand it over to my good friend with her new icon, Stephanie Wilson, for Freedom Over Fascism. Hey, Steph. I love the new icon.
Oh, thanks. So Freedom Over Fascism is now having fireside chats on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 1 Eastern. I decided it needed a little bit of an overhaul, and purple and orange together is always like my favorite. This week, I am having Rachel, this woman votes, who's been around, and she's going to talk about epistemic war, which we will break down and talk about what that means. And I'm having Marlon Weems on Wednesday to talk about, the way I say it is going to sound really boring. It's taxes, but like how does the government work in terms of money as we think about what we should be doing in terms of taxes. I'm with Banner and Backbone per Friday on the Anti-Fascist Book Club, and I welcome you all. And I too am thinking about creating a merch store, so if anybody wants to help, I would look forward to that as well. And please subscribe, paid if you can, and love you all.
And don't forget, for all these shows for Steph Wilson too, on Tuesday and Wednesday, we will be now restreaming or cross-platforming on Sick of the Shit Publications and Banner and Backbone, because we think the discussions are incredibly important. And I want to boost you as much as I can. So please come subscribe to Steph. And next, my good friend Beth and the Possibilitarians Light. How are you this? Hey, Beth. Promote yourself. Shamelessly plug yourself.
Shamelessly plug myself. Well, I'm the Possibilitarian's Light. I'm still trying to believe that all things are possible, even in this current climate. I do write about my personal trauma in childhood and through adulthood. And I love doing this on Mondays with my friends. I do Time for Life with Soso on Wednesdays. Hi, Soso. Wish you were here. And we are looking forward to having Wendy Parker tell some stories this Wednesday. So it's going to be fun. Thank you. If you're able to be a paid subscriber, that's wonderful. If not, that's still wonderful. Please follow. Love you all.
Thanks, Beth. Please subscribe to Beth. She does all our meditations. The Time for Life section for the meditations themselves are written by Beth, recorded by Beth. Soso and Beth provide the photography. It's beautiful. It takes, like they explain it, some time out for life. So come support them. I'll also put Soso's QR code up here too, because we're talking about her, and I can, and she's my friend, and she's our co-host here on the show. So shamelessly plugging Soso. Go subscribe to her. She does some amazing photography. She has some really cool discussions. And I'm excited for everything that she's doing here on this platform right now too. She's spreading a lot of light with just the positivity she's bringing. And then just put mine back up. And as we close out, come support me here at Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm fucking awesome. You love me. You know you love me. Come support me. We're growing rapidly still. Please come support, paid or free. It doesn't matter. Both help. Follow, paid, free, anywhere. It doesn't matter. Like I just said, I love the support, love the community, and love that we continue to grow and have these amazing discussions. So thank you, everyone. We will be back next week, as always, for our next Chronically Illing Out on Monday morning, every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Have a wonderful day. Y'all will see me later, if it's still Monday the 2nd, for Palin Talk on Banner and Backbone with Shane Urich. And let's go have a great day, because as we like to say, we're done being sick of this shit here. Now we're doing this shit. Love you all. Thank you.